In my last year on Wall Street, my bonus was $3.6 million, and I was angry because it wasn't big enough. I was 30 years old, had no children to raise, no debts to pay, no philanthropic goal in mind. I wanted more money for exactly the same reason an alcoholic needs another drink. I was addicted. I already knew I wanted to be rich, but when I started out, I had a different idea about what wealth meant. At 22, when I walked onto that trading floor for the first time and saw the glowing flat-screen TVs, it looked as if the traders were playing a video game inside a spaceship. If you won this video game, you became what I most wanted to be: rich.
Money, power, addiction. For 8 years, Sam Polk lived the life of the Wolf of Wall Street. Money, power, addiction. Is it really the ultimate dream?
It was during the crash of 2008. It was a very scary time. All of my attention had been focused above me, on the people that had more than me. And for the first time, it was as if I stood on the edge of a building and looked down and saw the entire rest of the world below me and realized that I had been living an incredibly selfish life.
Sam Polk abandoned the world of finance, left New York, and set up an association in Los Angeles to help the poor. Is his story the exception to the rule? Generations of philosophers have written about the dog-eat-dog nature of man, and the history of the world seems to illustrate this implacable law. Today, there are scientists who question this vision of human nature, amongst them psychologists, primatologists, mathematicians, and neuroscientists.
This is not a real brain, because our real brains are not colored like this.
They are inventing a new vocabulary where altruism and cooperation are keywords. At times of global challenge, we reflect on the true nature of man, angel or demon, and we reflect on the tools which will best serve to effect change.
So, long life to the altruistic revolution. Viva la revolución de altruismo.
Broadcast images and news bulletins reinforce our impression of a violent, divided world with an immutable destiny. But could this be a distorted view? Let's take a look at an example. On the 29th of August 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. The seawall gives way, and half of the town disappears under floodwater. Chaos threatens. The aftermath of such disasters forms the subject of rigorous study led by a team of investigators from the Center of Disaster Research at the University of Delaware. For 30 years, this unique center has documented human behavior in the wake of 700 disasters. Their findings have obliged us to revise our thinking.
There's this myth that once a disaster happens, chaos breaks out, that people are running amok, engaging in in negative behavior, that they turn selfish for some reason.
Tonight, entire towns have been wiped out around Gulfport, Mississippi.
2 days after the disaster, the media focus on a phenomenon which will later prove insignificant.
Dans cette situation très chaotique, les scènes de pillage se multiplient.
Stop! Lâche ça et arrête-toi! Lâche ça! Fusil à l'épaule, ce policier tente tant bien que mal de faire respecter un semblant d'ordre dans les rues de la Nouvelle-Orléans. Depuis le passage du cyclone,
These images are broadcast all over the world, in every language.
In most neighborhoods, it is pure anarchy. The number of looters is far more than the number of officers.
This is absolutely not borne out in the research that we've done and that others have done over the past few decades. The idea that widespread looting occurs simply doesn't happen.
The reality is that survivors queue without pushing, calmly awaiting their turn. However, this image is hardly sensational enough to make the headlines.
People don't suddenly turn antisocial. What we actually see is that people engage in helping behavior. They help their neighbors, they help strangers, they share food, they give rides to each other, and that there's much more pro-social behavior that emerges after a disaster than antisocial behavior.
To risk one's life to save another is often an anonymous act, and one that is usually played out far from the lens of a television camera. Here, 2 people jump onto the track to save someone they don't know. Many similar images are captured by the impersonal eye of the surveillance camera. Until the 1960s, the majority of researchers were of the opinion that true altruism did not exist. That to help someone else only serves to appease one's own conscience. So what makes ordinary people risk their life for someone they don't even know? "30 years ago, research psychologist Daniel Batson went against the grain of popular belief and decided to settle this question in a more scientific way.
The question in the egoism-altruism debate is not whether egoism exists, because we know that. That is, we're capable of caring about our own welfare. The question is whether we're capable of caring about others' welfare for their sake and not for our own.
To act selflessly for the good of others, in their interest alone, is the true definition of altruism. In the beginning, Daniel Batson was skeptical.
When I first began, I assumed the answer to this was, the answer is no. Altruism doesn't really exist.
He launches a series of experiments which will change his mind. Here, a young woman is given electric shocks. The participants in the experiment observe her in front of a screen. They are unaware that she is an actress simulating pain. Surprisingly, when asked whether they would like to leave or take her place, there were some who were ready to replace her.
3, 4, 3, 7.
And yet, a surprising number, when they felt a predominance of empathic concern, the vast majority said, no, I don't want to take the shocks, but I don't want her to take the shocks, and so I'll do it.
And so?
Well, that's consistent with the idea that their motivation was altruistic.
Batson puts forward a possible explanation: the feeling of empathy. Empathy seems to be a prerequisite of any altruistic act. But what is empathy?
Sometimes you'll see someone and they haven't even spoken to you yet, but you already know what's going on. You already know that they're upset or you know that they're happy. And that's because you're internally resonating, mimicking what is going on with them. So empathy is our innate ability to feel what another person is feeling.
But how does empathy work? An initial response comes from the discipline of neuroscience. Tanya Singer contributes actively to the advances made in this area of research. For a long time, she has had a keen interest in the study of empathy, perhaps because the question of the other presented itself from birth. Who better than a twin sister to open up the mysteries of a relationship built up from the very beginning on gestures and looks?
Die Frage, die wirklich die soziale Neurowissenschaft ausmacht, ist, wie kommt eigentlich ein anderes Gehirn in mein Gehirn? Also wie mache ich Sinn von meiner sozialen Realität? Wie verstehe ich andere Menschen?
Understanding someone else's feelings, their joy, fear, even their pain. Can this be detected in the brain? Tanya Singer thinks so. While her colleagues snigger and predict that she will only find an empty brain, she recruits a selection of young couples. One partner will be subjected to painful electric shocks in the presence of the other. What will happen in the brain of the person witnessing their partner's suffering?
Wenn ich Schmerz bekomme, dann kommt das Schmerzsignal über unterschiedliche Afferenzen in die Insula und aktiviert eine ganze Schmerzmatrix in meinem Gehirn. Und diese Schmerzmatrix im Gehirn kennen wir gut. Aber was wir nicht wussten, ist, was passiert im Gehirn, wenn jemand anders Schmerzen hat und ich fühle gerade gar nichts in meinem Körper.
To begin with, the researchers monitor activity in the husband's brain whilst he undergoes the electric shocks. They then compare this with when he sees his wife subjected to the same treatment. Tanya Singer compares these two images of his brain.
Sie sehen hier auf diesen Bildern, dass zum Beispiel hier das Rote, was die empathische Reaktion ist, überlappt mit dem Grünen. Das heißt, es sind gleiche Netzwerke, die aktiviert werden, wenn wir den Schmerzen selber fühlen, grün, oder wenn wir in Empathie mit jemandem anderen gehen. Was ich fühle, ist dieses Gefühl, also diese emotionale, aversive Emotion, die mit Schmerz verbunden ist.
So empathy seems to have its roots in biology. This would explain why supporters are so passionate about their favourite team, and why we are so touched by the drama we see on a screen. To suffer or to see suffering is almost the same thing for the brain. The pain of one person becomes the pain of another. Our brains are wired to resonate with others.
When human beings have emotions, such as happiness or anger or fear or disgust, we show them. Why? Why do we show our emotions? It's not hard to construct an argument from evolutionary biology as to why we would experience emotions, why it would be good for us as a species, as an animal, to feel anger or happiness or fear or disgust. But not only do I feel those things inside me, but I show them. And not only do I show them, but you can read them. And not only do you read them, but you copy them.
American psychologist Paul Ekman has identified 7 universally recognizable emotions. We asked the actor Alex Poisson to act them out. anger, fear, surprise, scorn, joy, disgust, sadness. The language of empathy is universal. Identifying the feelings of another is the first step towards understanding their needs and how to respond to them. If this ability is biological and universal, there should be evidence of altruism from a very early age. Is this the case? Here, at the Institute Max Planck in Leipzig, Germany, children are recruited from nursery age to participate in a highly original program of research.
Toll! Ist das nicht schön, mein Bild? Mein Bild, ist das toll. Oh, da bin ich ganz stolz. Oh, jetzt ist mein Bild fertig. Oh, guckt euch mal mein Bild an. So, jetzt bin ich müde, jetzt gehe ich mal schlafen. Tschüss.
Das Bild gefällt mir nicht. Das werde ich jetzt zerreißen.
The sight of a child selfishly focused on the quest for pleasure has long predominated infant psychology. Through a long series of experiments carried out on hundreds of children from all walks of life, Michael Tomasello and Felix Warneken are going to shake up a few theories.
Und hier, fertig. Kommt hier hoch. Ja? Guck mal hier. Here you see me putting towels on a clothesline when I accidentally drop it on the floor. While I'm doing that, a toddler is watching. Und hier. Oh! He's 18 months of age. And so the question we had was, will children understand, first of all, what the problem is that I'm having? And then, would they be willing to help? So, da, kommt hier rüber. Oh. Oh. Da kann ich weitermachen. Ne?
I was not expecting the children to be quite so helpful at quite such a young age. That was definitely a surprise.
Guck mal hier, mein Auto.
They're kind of indiscriminately helpful, automatically. They don't care if somebody's watching, they just help naturally.
Ui, ui, ui. Ui, ui, ui. Da. Oh. But these are all situations that are not very costly. So we were wondering if children continue to help when it would be more effortful and costly for them to do so. This time, the toddler is having fun playing in a ball pool. And so the question is, even though the child has fun doing something by himself, would he get up and help?
So, dann kann ich das auch da rein tun. Und das hier rein. Und das auch. Huch! Da ist sowas.
Even though the child derives no benefit from his action, he is living proof of altruism. But where does this act of spontaneity come from? Can it be provoked?
Soll ich die hier rein tun? Ja.
Some of the children, we rewarded them for helping in the next trials, and other children we didn't reward them.
And we observed that children who had not been rewarded before would continue to help at a very high rate. However, those children who had previously been rewarded, they were now less likely to help.
It's amazing finding. They've lost the internal fun of it because you've rewarded it out of existence.
So cooperation comes naturally. But how would you go about proving it? The children who were tested were about 15 months old. Education may have played a part. Let's have a look at some younger children in the baby lab at Yale University in the States. Heading up this lab are Karen Wynn and Paul Bloom, a couple in real life, as well as in their scientific work. The originality of their studies has revolutionized our thinking in respect of the very young. To know if a baby can be altruistic or not, one must first ask the very basic question: can a baby distinguish between right and wrong?
I would give up a month of my life to be a baby for 5 minutes, to experience the world as a baby does, to see the world through a baby's eyes. When you look at a baby, you wouldn't think the baby knows anything. They're so small and so incompetent and so adorable. And the idea that they would be capable of moral judgment at a gut level seemed to me to be unrealistic, seemed to me to be crazy.
So are you going to do some baby science for us today?
How do you find the answers to these complex questions when babies can't even speak? Karen Wynn has found a solution in the guise of a puppet show. Here, a white dog tries to open a box full of toys. Ethan, 6 months old, is captivated. The blue dog helps him. He is the good guy. Whereas the yellow dog doesn't behave very well.
Do you see this?
A lab student who doesn't know how each dog behaved asks Ethan to choose.
Hi. Hi, Karen. Which one do you like?
The baby findings are big. They're the vast majority of babies, say 4 out of every 5 babies, choose the good guy over the bad guy. Across a range of circumstances, we must have tested hundreds of babies by now. When we first published the findings, a lot of people were very impressed. A lot of people were very skeptical. And I think many people do believe that babies are perfect idiots. They do believe that babies are blank slates. The dominant view in a lot of psychology is that we start off not knowing much, certainly not knowing much about morality.
Who do you like? That one. Who do you like?
On that particular day, the good guy was blue, but at other times it was yellow. The color has no significance. The outcome is always the same.
We showed even 3-month-olds these scenarios and found that they orient visually to the nice characters and away from the negative characters. And that really surprised me. I was, thinking, we'll find an age where they don't show these judgments and an age at which they do, so we can talk about when this ability to judge others emerges. And instead what we found was it seems to already be present by 3 months of age.
But maybe that's just a social preference. Maybe they just like the good guy more. The hard question is it really a moral preference? Well, one way to look at that is to look at reward and punishment.
The show is repeated, but this time it's a question of whether to punish or not. The child is a little older. In front of her, the good blue dog and the bad yellow dog. Each dog has a treat in his bowl.
We have another doggy that wants a treat. We'll put him here. Let's see. Oh no, Iris! There's no more treats left. Look, there's no more treats left. Theodora, can you take a treat from one of these guys and give it to him? Who do you want to take from and give to him?
Will the child dare to deprive one of the dogs of his treat? And if so, which one? The good guy or the bad guy?
Are babies calculating what are the just desserts of different individuals?
Like the majority of the children tested, Theodora chooses to punish the bad guy.
And this is interesting to us, fascinating to us, because it suggests that babies' preferences are moral in the same sense that your preference or my preference would be moral. If I see a bad person, it's not just that I want to avoid them. I think what it is to think that something is bad is also to believe it should be punished. It suggests that the moral understanding of babies is connected with notions of fairness and justice.
This is for this guy. He doesn't have a treat. All right. He says, thank you, Azaria. Thank you.
The interpretation of that result is that babies have a rudimentary moral understanding, that we are born with, all of us, a capacity to tell right from wrong.
If a sense of justice and an attraction to good are innate, can we deduce that this is a result of evolution?
What the study of chimpanzees provides is basically time traveling to our evolutionary past. So the logic behind is that if we find a behavior both in chimpanzees and humans, we can infer that probably our common ancestor 5 to 7 million years ago already possessed these traits.
What was really a surprise was that we found that chimps also do some helping. And that was not expected at all. I was expecting them not to care at all.
Chimpanzees would spontaneously go there, pick up the sponge and give it back to her without a reward, without being told to help, also doing it spontaneously. By looking at chimpanzees and children and finding that there are these striking similarities, we can assume that the common ancestor already possessed it, and therefore it cannot have been due to cultural practices alone.
But isn't this lab animal just a performing monkey? Keen to help the researcher he has come to know well. Researchers have always underlined the aggression and cruelty which monkeys display amongst their own kind. Is it possible to reconcile these two contrasting images? On the one hand violent, on the other cooperative. It is away from prying eyes that a researcher in primatology at the world-famous Yerkes Center in the USA attempts to resolve this contradiction. Frans de Waal soon realized the discrepancy between what he observed on the ground and behavior that had been written about in books.
Chimpanzees are murderers, sometimes between communities. They kill each other sometimes, but within the community they often don't. What I found is that in groups of chimpanzees there's a lot of peacemaking also going on. Chimpanzees console each other, meaning that one of them is distressed, they have lost a fight, for example, and others come over and touch them and calm them down.
Frans de Waal didn't know how to interpret these acts of consolation until he attended a conference on infant psychology, where he discovered how children console stressed parents.
And so my reaction was, well, if that is empathy, then I know a lot of empathy in chimpanzees, because that's exactly what they do.
The researcher decides to carry out tests for empathy among chimpanzees. He studies what is known in scientific terms as the synchronization of bodies, when one mimics the emotion or expression of another. Frans de Waal is interested in yawning. Yawning at the same time as someone else is proof of empathy. This phenomenon is well known among humans. But what about primates? When you show a picture of a chimpanzee yawning to another monkey, he will yawn as well. That is on condition that he knows the other. Discovering that primates seem equipped with empathy is one thing, but does it necessarily lead to cooperation?
We also recently published an experiment, you may have heard about it, on altruism in chimpanzees, where the question is, do chimpanzees care about the welfare of somebody else? You will see how that goes.
Two chimpanzees are placed side by side. In front of one is a basket of red and green tokens. If he chooses a red token only, he will receive food. If he chooses a green token, both monkeys will receive food. Whatever his choice, he is always rewarded. Is he concerned about his companion or not? In the majority of cases, he chooses the green token, the one which feeds them both.
Until we did these experiments, people said only humans care about the welfare of others. All the other animals are working completely on a selfish operation. They have completely selfish motivations. And what we're showing is that unselfish motivations, which we humans have, are actually quite old and probably not only limited to the primates.
In this test, carried out and filmed at the University of Chicago, a rat is imprisoned in a transparent tube. Sensing his distress, a fellow rat comes to his rescue. A series of experiments carried out on other animals has shown that cooperation is widespread. These studies would suggest that altruistic behavior is forged during the course of evolution. Yet this hypothesis contradicts the disciples of Darwin, who maintained that the driving forces behind evolution are natural selection and mutation. Is this view too simplistic?
In my opinion, the story of evolution is more complicated than just competition, than just struggle for survival. There's something else really in there which is fundamentally important, and this is cooperation. All of us watching there would feel very anxious about something bad is about to happen. We all would ask the question, what could I do to help? It would be our instinct, actually, we want to help. Maybe we wouldn't know what to do and we wouldn't be the heroes, but we would all want to help. That's already the question for me. Where do these instincts come from? And in my opinion, in my research, these instincts come from the fact that our brain evolved in this context of cooperation with others.
Martin Nowak is an evolutionary biologist and mathematician, and it is with equations that he addresses this paradox. How can natural selection favor cooperation? Martin Nowak explains using 5 mechanisms.
The first mechanism is direct reciprocity, which means that we meet again and again, and if I help you now, you will help me later. So I help you, you help me. It's sort of a very fundamental, simple wisdom, and this wisdom can lead cooperators to win. But it's not the whole story. That cannot explain all of human cooperation. There's something else which is truly important, and this is something that I described years later, and this is indirect reciprocity. Indirect reciprocity is I help you and others observe. And the act of helping gives the reputation of valuable member of the community. And people are obsessed with reputation. We continuously talk to each other about others. That's gossip. We are obsessed with gossip. We talk about others. We find out about others. What do you know of this person? Is this person a cooperator or a defector? And then the three other mechanisms are spatial selection, group selection, and kin selection.
Spatial selection is when cooperative people group together and help each other. For example, neighbors. Group selection demonstrates that a cooperative group wins every time over a group whose individuals do not cooperate. Finally, kin selection illustrates that we are likely to care more for close family.
The reason we have these big societies and we're doing so well, and we have 8 billion people in the world, is because we are cooperative. It's not because we are competitive. No, it's because we are cooperative. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here.
But if cooperation is more effective than competition, why is it not always the preferred option? Why these conflicts which continue to threaten our planet?
One question which often comes up is, if babies are born with a moral sense, with a sense of right and wrong, why are some adults so rotten? Why do we turn out to be such bad people sometimes?
A crucial question. Back to the baby lab for an initial response.
We decided to ask this question of young babies. Do they distinguish between individuals who are similar to them in some attribute or individuals who are different from them?
Which one would you like?
The experiment begins with a very simple choice. The child is asked to choose between two types of cereal. Cheerios.
Which one would you like?
Or crackers.
Do you want the crackers?
The same question is asked of two puppets. Each one is going to make a different choice.
Yum. I like Cheerios.
Which one of the two will the child prefer? The one who has chosen the same cereal
Cheerios.
or the other?
Isaiah, who do you like? That guy? Okay, that guy?
We found that in our own lab, that babies prefer other individuals who are similar to them, who share their tastes.
This was the case for 8 out of 10 children.
It's fascinating to see in babies that even distinctions that you shouldn't think would matter a lot. But this is true for adults too. So there's a lot of examples from social psychology experiments, but also from the real world, of how the most subtle distinctions, which sports team you root for, what color shirt you wear, can cause people to split the world into people like me and people like everybody else.
Would dividing the world into us and them lead to the rejection of others? The puppet who prefers the other cereal, namely the one who does not have the same taste as the child, tries to open the box. The blue dog helps him. The yellow one prevents him. This time, the child chooses the bad guy.
Surprisingly to me, they like someone who's mean to a character that has expressed a different taste from the baby's own.
In a sense, most of the evil in the world is caused by our willingness to distinguish between people we care about and people we don't. And this desire to split the world in this way, to split the world into us versus them, shows up very early. It shows up in the youngest babies we test. And it's something which lasts our lives, and it's something that we overcome only with great difficulty. And this split between those we care about and those we don't is, I think, a fundamental part of human nature. But it leads to all sorts of problems in the world.
Creating barriers between us and them seems to be a default setting. Giving preference to some, excluding others, can this division be measured in the brain? Tanya Singer asks herself this very question. In the case of the couple linked by affection, the researcher demonstrated that to suffer, or to see suffering, amounts to practically the same thing in the brain. But what of strangers? Is empathy present in quite the same way?
Wir haben Fußballfans eingeladen, Männer, und haben nur gesagt, der links von dir im Scanner ist ein Fan von dem gleichen Fußballclub und der rechts sitzt, ist jemand von dem Rival Football Team, also vom Gegner Fußballclub.
What will happen on the sports field where the gap between us and them is at its widest? Will the fan of the red team be sympathetic towards the fan of the blue team when he receives an electric shock? According to the observer, it is not the part of the brain related to pain which is activated, but rather that of reward. The feeling of empathy has disappeared, making way for a little sadistic pleasure.
Man hat sich sogar gefreut, anstelle mitzuleiden, wenn ein sogenannter Outgroup-Member vom anderen Fußballspiel einen Schock bekommen hat.
I think the implications for society are important. Many of us are worried about racism and prejudice. We start off with very small, narrow groups, my family, my friends. And the question of how to expand our moral circle to make an us that includes everybody is, yes, it's a very important question.
How do we go about expanding the moral circle and so developing altruism? One man knows all about this challenge. He is one of 1,000 others. But this particular man possesses one extraordinary characteristic. His brain is one of the most studied in the whole world. And this collaboration between scientists and Mathieu Ricard is paving a new way to cultivate altruism. Numerous studies have effectively shown that individual change is possible through meditation. Could this principle equally apply to a change in society?
Je suis pas un missionnaire, comment dirais-je, exalté. J'ai l'impression qu'au contraire, de faire partie d'une communauté de beaucoup de personnes dans beaucoup de domaines qui ressentent la même chose. Et c'est ça qui me donne de l'enthousiasme. Parce que si tu es tout seul à prêcher dans le désert, j'ai aucune vocation à faire ça.
"40 years ago, Mathieu Ricard left behind a career in molecular biology to become a Buddhist monk. But the monk lives in the real world, and the threats which weigh heavy on society cry out to him. Shaped by the Buddhist culture, which places altruism and compassion at the heart of all action, Mathieu Ricard decided to promote these values. Armed with all the tools he had acquired as a researcher, he set about collecting and analyzing all the scientific work which had been carried out on altruism. He travels the planet giving conferences, and the compilation of his work becomes a program of action.
Quel concept pour résoudre ces défis?
Au fil des rencontres que j'ai eu l'occasion de faire, aussi bien auprès de maîtres spirituels qu'auprès de psychologues, de neuroscientifiques, d'économistes, de spécialistes de l'environnement, d'entrepreneurs sociaux, c'est d'avoir davantage de considération pour autrui, c'est-à-dire l'altruisme. Si vous avez davantage de considération pour autrui, vous n'allez pas jouer au casino avec les ressources qu'on vous a confiées simplement pour avoir un meilleur bonus à la fin de l'année. Si vous avez davantage de considération pour autrui, vous allez vous assurer que dans le travail, dans l'éducation, dans la vie sociale, on rassemble les conditions pour que tout à chacun puisse s'épanouir. And if you have more consideration for others, you are not going to ransack that planet that we have. And at current rate, we don't have 3 planets to continue that way. So the question is, okay, altruism is the answer. It's not just a noble ideal, but can it be a real pragmatic solution?
To take action in the world is also the wish of Richard Davidson, acclaimed neuroscientist, distinguished in 2006 by Time magazine as one of the top 100 most influential people in the world. His meeting with the Dalai Lama was set to alter the course of neuroscience.
At that meeting, His Holiness the Dalai Lama challenged me and he said, look, you've been using tools of modern neuroscience to study depression and to study anxiety and to study fear. Why can't you use those same tools to study kindness and compassion? So that meeting critically changed my life and my career.
Is the kindness and altruism brought about by meditation detectable in the brain? In order to find out, Davidson's team recruited experts who had practiced meditation for more than 10,000 hours. Amongst them, Mathieu Ricard.
In some sense, you can think of these individuals as scientists of their own mind. They are investigating their own mind, using contemplative practice as their microscope.
Ok, donc on commence maintenant en bloc de Lou Matin, 1 minute, qui sera suivi par 2 minutes et demie de méditation en mantra avec rosaire. On commence maintenant.
The researchers see an increase in the intensity of gamma waves on the screen. They also note a big difference in the areas which regulate thoughtfulness and emotion. The brain of the meditators has undergone significant change.
Very, very rarely do we do an experiment in our laboratory when we can actually see a change in the brain signals with the naked eye. With Mathieu, it was boom! We were able to see it right there with the naked eye, right on the computer monitors as we were recording it. And the first thing we thought is that something must be wrong with the equipment.
The discovery is extraordinary. Mental activity can induce both structural and functional changes in the brain.
Mon cerveau n'est absolument pas spécial. C'est ça qui m'a réconforté. Ça serait absolument pas intéressant, toute cette recherche, si c'était d'étudier quelques gens un peu, disons, spéciaux, hein, comme il y a des gens qui peuvent rester 11 minutes en apnée sous l'eau. Mais justement, moi, ce qui m'a fasciné, encouragé avec cette recherche, c'est que des gens qui venaient de l'Himalaya, des Tibétains, des Bhoutanais, mais aussi des Anglais, des Français, des Américains, des hommes, des femmes, des moines et des nonnes, des laïcs qui avaient pratiqué. Ce qui comptait, ce qui faisait la différence, c'était combien de temps avaient-ils pratiqué.
A number of colleagues are skeptical. They reproach the researcher for only studying the brains of exceptional people, practiced in the art of meditation. So Davidson and his team recruit ordinary people who have never meditated and whom they train to do so.
Where we showed that only 2 weeks of practice for just 30 minutes a day, so it's a total of 7 hours of practice, was enough to change the brain.
Contrary to the doctrine which has prevailed for years, the brain is a plastic organ which produces thousands of neurons every day, in accordance with real-life experience.
When you sit down and watch television for an hour, your brain is being shaped. We know that playing as short as 1.5 hours of a video game can actually induce a structural change in your brain. Just 1.5 hours. So this idea that the brain is fixed has been just shattered by modern science. I mean, just completely and totally shattered. And dedicate this to the welfare of others. If purely mental activity can lead to these kinds of changes in the brain, it became clear, which has become a slogan, if you will, for our Center for Investigating Healthy Minds. Our slogan is, change your mind, change the world. And through that, all kinds of things can become possible.
But in order to change the world, should we not first, each and every one of us, develop qualities such as generosity and kindness? Is this even possible?
Comment est-ce que les gens s'imaginent que ces qualités humaines qui sont plastiques, c'est-à-dire qui peuvent changer, qu'elles viennent comme ça, pouf. Ou alors ils disent, ah non, je suis comme ça. C'est à prendre ou à laisser, c'est mon tempérament. Point final. C'est gravé dans la pierre, on n'y touche plus. Ben non, c'est faux. Les 2500 ans de tradition contemplative vous montrent que c'est faux. On peut changer, n'importe qui. On part d'un certain point de départ, on arrive à un autre. C'est pas tous le même. On part pas du même endroit, on n'arrive pas au même endroit. Mais il y a tout un voyage.
Davidson's team proposed just such a journey to young children.
Ooh, good job.
A scientific program has been launched in a primary school close to the laboratory.
Maybe start breathing without the rock and see how it feels.
The mental training for adults has been adapted to breathing exercises, as well as to cooperation and the expression of gratitude.
Hi guys. Hi. Wonderful to be with you. So do you guys know what I do? I'm a scientist and I study the brain. Does anyone know where the brain is? For the first time, taking the insights that we've gleaned from the laboratory and bringing them out to real people in the real world, where we have the potential to make a real difference. We are choosing children at specific ages where we know from modern neuroscience that their brains are particularly plastic. And so if we can teach them simple practices of kindness at that age, we think it can make a lasting difference. From my perspective, meditation is personally, for me, the best way to cultivate mindfulness and altruism.
Do you guys remember when we were talking about what we felt like when we were angry and where you felt it in your body? Do you remember that? Well, gratitude's the same thing. But the nice thing with gratitude is you're not only giving a present to mom, but you're giving a present to you too.
This program has been evaluated by the researchers, and they have noted a reduction in the number of conflicts and an increase in generous behavior.
I am grateful that my mom loves I am alive. I'm grateful for Buddy that is living on this earth. Good job.
At the beginning of the experiment, during a test with stickers, the children only shared with their best friend.
Staying alive on the planet.
At the end of 12 weeks, there was no difference between the best friend and the one they liked the least. The circle had been enlarged.
The children who I never dreamt would want to share, in the beginning of the year were really self-absorbed, self-centered for their world. At the end of the year, they wanted to give to everybody. So I think what happens is they're looking beyond themselves. You know, it's not just me. If you think about it, it's not just this child going to school. It's me and going home. It's I come to school. I come to my family at school. I come to my family at the Wiseman Center. It's greater. It's helping them see greater, more of the world, and getting them connected. I am sure that we will see this language as these children grow, being used steadily.
The town of Madison has asked Davidson's team to extend this program to public schools.
The glitter ball. And what's going to happen to the glitter? Take a deep breath in. Let it out. Is it settled?
There will be a day when children will go to mental exercise classes where they'll learn to cultivate attention. They'll learn to cultivate kindness in the same way that physical exercise is done today.
Let it out.
But could this type of program become widespread? Sandtown, West Baltimore, is home to one of the highest number of criminals in the country. 3% of the population are under lock and key. It is a place ravaged by unemployment and drug trafficking, which made the headlines during the April 2015 riots. Yet 3 men have chosen to live here. 2 brothers, Ali and Atman, grew up here, left for university, and then returned with their friend Andy. Their aim is to try and defuse the social and racial time bomb set to explode at any moment. In this area of relegation, school life reflects the violence on the streets. The 3 men arrived here 5 years ago with a mission to prove the statistics wrong. To put forward a different proposal to the ones currently in practice.
After my first year, we have an opportunity to meet Andy, Atman, and Ali. And they came and introduced themselves and said, hey, this is what we want to do for children. And the principal and I said, what? You want to do what?
Inhale deep through your nose, filling your stomach up with air like it's a balloon.
I ain't hear no breathing.
Exhale it all out, pushing your stomach in, pushing all that air out of your body.
Every morning, the entire school, teachers included, takes part in 15 minutes of mental exercise. And they repeat this at the end of the day.
Inhale deep. Exhale it out.
I think the program can help them by giving them the ability to regulate themselves and to kind of block out all the external stimuli, all the stuff that's going on in the neighborhood, all the crime, the drug use, the violence. Instead of being with that, they can learn to go inward and not think about that and have almost a place of peace within themselves.
Don't forget to breathe. Inhale as deep as you can. Really fill your stomach up with air. Long, slow, deep breath.
Ramon spent 10 years as a gang member. 3 years of yoga and meditation have transformed him into an educator.
I lost my father. It hit me kind of hard. And I really wasn't able to, cope with all that type of, pain and anger of not having a father growing up. And my mother, she had a boyfriend, and he was very abusive to her. So it was a lot of things going on in my house that had me a lot, real angry. And I couldn't take my anger out with nobody, none of my family members. So I thought that was an easy way for me to get all my anger out, was to come out and take my own anger out on other people, which is not the right thing to do, but that's how I was living.
What happened to your father?
My father got murdered. He was shot in the head and put in the trunk of a car. They blew the car up. So it's kind of like a movie, but you really don't think it's like a movie.
Exhale, bring your head up and relax. Inhale deep again. Remember, fill your stomach up with air. Don't forget, feet flat on the floor. On the edge of your seat, head, neck, and spine straight. We're going to be pushing the balls of our feet and our toes into the ground while raising our heels. So everybody, inhale deep through your nose and raise your heels up.
There's stories of right here up north in Pulaski where people would bring out semi-automatic guns and just be firing off and stuff like that. But the kids see stuff that most kids wouldn't see, you know what I mean? Especially at that age. And they have to deal with it, you know, so, and that stuff sticks with you. A lot of people talk about soldiers, you know, having PTSD from coming from war, where I think these kids have PTSD because of what's going on around here. They're dealing with all this trauma and all this stress and stuff like that, so when they come to school and you see Johnny's having a bad day, doesn't want to talk to anyone, it's probably because he saw or experienced something and it's still with him.
I hate this stupid school!
Wow. You still ain't telling me. You just gonna walk right here on rampage mode all day? I'm gonna let you calm yourself down. You ready? You wanna take a deep breath from me? You wanna take a deep breath from me?
There's the one girl who used to fight all the time, and one day a girl came up to her and was in her face and was talking about her mother or something about her clothes or something like that, you know what I mean? And the girl was like, you know, you lucky that I do my breathing, my meditation, or I would have punched you in the face. And, you know, she told the girl and realized it consciously that, hey, I usually would have done this, and now that I do the breathing and the meditation, I'm doing this.
This time when you inhale, I want you pulling all the positive energy that the earth has to offer from all the trees, the water, the plants, your fellow classmates, your mindful moment staff, your teachers. I want you pulling all that positive energy that they had to offer. Inhale. Really use your imagination. Exhale. Let out all that negative energy.
It has truly made a difference in our whole climate and environment. And children are just handling situations differently. Instead of arguing and screaming and yelling about a pencil, they're quiet. They ask what they need, and then they ask teachers for help instead of just trying to argue and fight it out amongst themselves.
It's fine, but just acknowledge that distraction, whether it's a thought or a sound, and then redirect your mind back to the breath and sending love to those people that stress you out or cause you to get angry.
Optional courses are on offer every day after school. Around 10 schools in Baltimore have recently adopted the program.
If your body is still, it's easy to keep your mind still. I see you.
A study carried out over 12 weeks at Johns Hopkins University underlines the benefits of the program, which have resulted in an improvement in academic work and a reduction in conflict.
But every time we breathe, we're going to be thinking about all those people that we love, whether it's our family or friends, no matter how far away they live, no matter if they're living or not. Love knows no boundaries.
Yeah, it's good.
Dissolve boundaries. Open yourself up to others and their suffering. But at what cost? Too much empathy can be draining and can lead to emotional exhaustion. How can this be avoided? A discovery made by Tanya Singer in Mathieu Ricard's brain could offer up a solution. She observed a certain kind of meditation in his brain, which allows him to connect with the suffering of others without activating the network usually associated with distress or fear. Does meditation protect him from the risk of stress and suffering brought about by too much empathy?
L'empathie, c'est vraiment une résonance affective. L'autre souffre, vous souffrez de sa souffrance. Vous allez souffrir de plus en plus et ça ne vous aide pas vraiment à aider l'autre et vous-même vous vous trouvez handicapé par cette détresse empathique. Donc il faut l'envelopper dans quelque chose, un état mental qui est extrêmement constructif, extrêmement positif, qu'est la compassion et l'amour altruiste.
Beides sind soziale Emotionen, beides sind Emotionen, die durch den Schmerz eines anderen verursacht werden, aber sie sind völlig verschieden von ihrer Qualität. Die eine kommt mit negativem Affekt, Gefühl von, also wie bei Schmerzen, und Mitgefühl kommt mit dem Gefühl von Wärme und positivem Affekt und Fürsorge und einer starken Motivation, anderen helfen zu wollen.
It is a traditionally held Buddhist view that compassion can be cultivated through a particular type of mental training. When Mathieu Ricard visualizes those who suffer, he wraps them in a warm presence and wishes their pain away. Can each and every one of us avoid being stressed from empathy by using the same technique to develop a more altruistic nature? Tanya Singer has launched the largest study ever undertaken. For 9 months, in Berlin and Leipzig, 200 volunteers follow a program of mental training. From many different walks of life, the participants have one thing in common. They have never meditated.
Hallo, hier ist Irina. Kannst du mich bitte mal reinlassen? Danke.
Irina is a nurse on the premature baby unit in a large hospital in Berlin. When she decided to take part in the study, she had faced the suffering of patients for over 30 years. Olaf used to work 80 hours a week as manager of a restaurant and was starting to feel increasingly isolated. Due to the enormous amount of pressure at work, Irina considered leaving her job. An American study has shown that 60% of healthcare workers are suffering or have suffered from burnout.
Ich habe über die 31 Jahre extrem viel gesehen, schlimme Dinge gesehen auf der Station. Ich habe viele fehl- und missgebildete Kinder gesehen. Ich habe viele tote Babys gesehen. Das macht was mit einem. Das macht einen Druck und man weiß nicht, wohin damit.
37 Schwangerschaftswochen.
Hospital staff are at the front line, but no one escapes the risk of losing their bearings.
Tja, ich hatte nicht mehr die Energie, nicht mehr die Kraft, jeden Tag so viel zu arbeiten. Also ich habe gemerkt, dass es Richtung Burnout geht. Also völlig leer und kaputt und habe gedacht, ich muss jetzt irgendwas anderes machen.
Ich war nicht immer freundlich zu meinen Kollegen, muss ich sagen, weil ich einfach so angespannt war und weil ich mich nicht in sie hineinversetzen konnte, jedenfalls nicht ausreichend.
Trained in different types of meditation, each participant commits to practicing 30 minutes every day. They must also attend the lab every week to undergo a battery of tests.
Sensoren hier an. Hier oben, dann die andere an der Schulter.
Okay. Das heißt, wir wollen wissen, ob man durch Training, tägliches mentales Training, sowohl sein Verhalten als auch sein Erleben verändern kann. Das heißt, kurz gesagt wollen wir wissen, ob man Stress reduzieren kann, ob man soziale Fähigkeiten wie Mitgefühl verbessern kann und damit Kooperation steigern kann.
Bombarded by television news reports, getting through a job interview, there are so many stressful situations, all liable to generate negative emotions.
88,
1000, Bitte beginnen Sie wieder bei
2043, 2000.
How are the 200 participants going to react and evolve during the course of the 9 months? Will this program of mental training, which offers different types of meditation, allow them to reduce their stress levels, confront their fears, and open themselves up to others? The findings are still being collated. It is therefore too early to disclose the scientific results. However, early reports indicate real change.
Ich habe in diesem Programm gelernt, in die Gedankenwelt der anderen Schwestern mich einzuführen und auch einfach mal gütiger zu sein, nicht mehr so streng zu sein. Und das ist dieses Feedback, dass ich mich sehr verändert habe, das bekomme ich von meinen Arbeitskollegen. Sie arbeiten inzwischen wieder gern mit mir zusammen und sie haben gesagt, das ist Wahnsinn, wie entspannt du jetzt bist.
Ich beobachte die Leute auch eher, wenn sie an mir vorbeigehen, dass ich sie dann sehe und mit ihnen nicht unbedingt spreche, aber dass ich dann vielleicht mit mir spreche darüber in Gedanken und sage, aha, das ist jetzt jemand, der Hilfe braucht, könnte es ja einfach mal ansprechen, hätte ich früher nicht gemacht. Jemand einfach auf der Straße angesprochen, ob er Hilfe braucht. Das würde ich jetzt tun, das tue ich auch.
Und wendet euch dazu bitte eurem Partner zu, dass ihr ein Gegenüber habt.
A reduction in stress and negative feeling allows an opening up to others. But will this kind of mental exercise increase cooperation? This is one of the key questions of this enormous program. A game has been specially devised to address this question. The participants of the study think they are playing a simple treasure hunt. It is in fact their inclination to help others which is being tested. Will they be more altruistic at the end of their 9 months of training? The results of a preliminary study suggest that 1 week of training in kindness has effectively increased their altruistic behavior.
Für mich ist es eindeutig, also jetzt schon viel Evidenz dafür, dass diese mentalen Trainingsprogramme extrem förderlich sein könnten für die Gesellschaft. Und wir denken auch darüber nach, so ein Resource-Institut zu gründen, damit dieses Protokoll, was jetzt in der Forschung entwickelt wird, für die Gesellschaft nutzbar gemacht wird, sodass es eben zum Beispiel in Schulen angewendet werden kann oder in der Ökonomie, in Business.
So what if this training in kindness can equally apply to happiness? A recent experiment supports this theory. It was carried out at the Harvard Business School, the most famous business school in the world. Here we usually study how to make money, not how to be happy. However, Michael Norton, Professor of Marketing, is interested in the best way of spending our money in order to be happy.
When we ask people, what do you think will make you happiest? So imagine I said to you, I can give you a mystery envelope with $20 in it, and you can spend it on yourself, or you can spend it on somebody else. Which one do you think will make you happier?
So I'm going to give you this envelope.
All right.
I'm going to ask you to open it.
Okay.
Read the instruction on the piece of paper. But
It's very mysterious.
Like it. It's very mysterious.
The researcher launches a real-life test. When some people leave to spend the money on themselves, others, like this young woman, are instructed to use it for someone else.
For someone else.
Right here. Not me, but anybody else.
All right.
Ready?
Which one?
She decides to buy lottery tickets and give them away.
Thank you.
People basically told us what they did with the money. People who got money for themselves bought junk for themselves. They bought coffees, they bought books, they bought themselves some music. But people who spent on other people did really, really different things. They gave money to homeless people. One person bought a stuffed animal for her niece. These really different giving behaviors that were so unusual compared to the stuff that we usually buy.
Oh, I thought that might be me. But thank you. But thank you. This was very fun. See? You got one.
Let's see how much you got.
Catch out the prize.
I won $5. Thank you very much.
This is fun. I love doing stuff like this.
The people who spent on themselves were no happier. They felt just the same as they had before. But the people who we gave them that mysterious envelope and told them to give it away to somebody else, they actually got happier that night. And in fact, our research shows you don't have to give away billions of dollars to be happy about giving. Little amounts of money can make you happy. $5, $20. That's enough to give you a boost from giving in that day. So it's not just for millionaires and billionaires to start giving and creating foundations. All of us in our everyday lives can do more giving, and we're going to get a happiness benefit from doing it.
Last one. 2 times. $2. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Michael Norton has carried out this same experiment in one of the world's poorest countries, Uganda, where a banknote can solve real personal problems. And to his surprise, as in North America, the happiest participants were those who gave to others.
An interesting study out of Stanford saw that we actually sometimes stop ourselves from helping others because there is a norm of self-interest out there in the world. There's this idea that we are all selfish, and therefore people will stop themselves from helping someone else because they worry that that other person thinks they're doing it for their own benefit. This is really interesting. But when you give people very little time to think about whether or not they will help, they will choose to help.
Is a selfless gesture, which happens quite spontaneously, as contagious as a virus. And how does this behavior spread through the vast social networks of friends and strangers? This is the question posed by Nicholas Christakis, a specialist in social networks who has just published a most surprising study.
We did an experiment in which we had these college students come into the laboratory. They were given a little bit of money, and they were randomly assigned to groups of 4 strangers. Then a bell would ring, and they'd be randomly assigned to a new person. Then a bell would ring, and they'd be randomly assigned to new persons, and so forth and so on for 6 rounds. And eventually what we were able to show with this experiment is that there's a kind of spread of kindness within the system, such that if the first person is kind to the second person goes on to be kind to the third person goes on to be kind to the fourth person, and the fourth person goes on to be kind to the fifth person. You could show that how the fourth person treated the fifth person depended on how the first person treated the second person, even though neither of those 2 people ever saw these 2 people over here. A kind of cascade of kindness through the system. How I treat my friends depends on how those people treat their friends, even though neither I nor my friends ever saw or interacted with those people. Like a kind of social contagion, mimicking a biological contagion.
So if you think about it, when you're doing an act of kindness for someone else, you're not only helping that person, you yourself are also helping yourself because you're feeling better, but also everyone who observes you gets impacted, and they in turn are more likely to go and help someone else. So you're creating a chain reaction of goodness.
Is it too utopian of you to imagine that such a chain reaction of goodness could propagate itself in any environment? Is altruism in any way compatible with modern economic systems? Here at a meeting of the World Economic Summit in Davos, the big cheeses from the world of finance meet to ponder the world of tomorrow and finalize agreements in utmost secrecy. In this little Swiss village, a red robe comes to brighten up the dark suits of the heads of state. Mathieu Ricard is officially invited to take part, as are Richard Davidson and Tanya Singer. The teasing, which surrounded the first brain studies of Buddhist monks, is but a far distant memory.
You look younger every year.
Thank you. You didn't bring Dalai Lama with you?
Well, ask to Mr. Schwab. Dalai Lama, Jim?
Hey.
Here it is. We build school with bamboos. In 3 months, you build a school for 2,000 kids for $150,000. You want to make a school? I'm your man. 2,000 children.
With
Go
bamboos.
for it.
With bamboos.
And all with bamboos. 100 teachers. It's amazing. In 3 months, it's done.
And cost, you know how much?
$150,000 for 2,000 children.
2,000
Ok, ok. Bon, j'essaie de le motiver un peu pour nous aider pour nos projets humanitaires. C'est un des grands magnats indiens. So if you look at the mind, look inside, and say, well, you would think, can I achieve a little more calm, stable, clear state of mind? So you would sit in a balanced posture. Because if you sort of recline like that, most will take a good nap. So that would not work.
The monk and the researchers do not as yet have access to the great amphitheatres, but they do fill the small halls which have been reserved for them, and they fully intend to benefit from this unique gathering of economic leaders to communicate their latest scientific results. Now in Davos, we shift from standard speeches on the means to safeguard economic growth to the praise of compassion, and no one seems surprised.
It is better to have short meditation, but regular and repeated. Parler ici 4 minutes sur l'altruisme ou sur réduire les inégalités, je ne peux pas y avoir de plus grands impacts. Ça vaut mieux que parler. Joseph Stiglitz. Si vous voulez, les cultures ne changent pas comme ça du jour au lendemain, comme on change le taux d'intérêt des banques. Mais le fait que quelque chose devient non seulement pas une excentricité ici, qu'on se dit il y a un truc sur la méditation, bon, mais que ça devienne presque normal, puisqu'on y en a une tous les matins, et que personne, les gens disent c'est sympa, ils ne se disent pas qu'est-ce que c'est que ce truc complètement ridicule. Symboliquement, c'est quand même, on se dit bon, il y a peut-être un petit quelque chose. So in a way, to be excessively self-centered is a lose-lose situation. Everyone is miserable in the end. And to open one's mind, extend that benevolence is a win-win situation.
Merci beaucoup.
Formidable, merci.
That we can actually do better. We can train our minds. We no longer should think of well-being as just something that occurs willy-nilly, but it is something that can be learned. I think that simple truth is something that needs to be spread in whatever ways we can do it. In my heart of hearts, I'm a scientist. I'm passionate about doing science. I love doing science. But science alone is not enough. We're not going to change the world by doing one more experiment. It's going to require other strategies in addition to science. The science is necessary, but it's not sufficient. We know from neuroscience that children's brains are more plastic.
Mindfulness is not something which just makes you more ambitious, more speedy, more efficient. Then you would have, I think, misunderstood the dimension of mindfulness, which is much bigger.
I think the pursuit of selfish happiness is a recipe for failure. It makes your life miserable. You know, me all day long. And you make the life everyone else miserable as well. It's a lose-lose situation.
The reception for the Nobel Prize giving coincides with that on meditation. It's a sign of the times that Mathieu Ricard and Tanya Singer find weighty allies like the former economic advisor to the Secretary General of the UN.
We're chasing stuff. We drive cars the size of houses.
We have houses the size of the states. Why? Well, we want it so much that we're ready to sacrifice the planet for it. I believe in a market economy within limits, but I don't believe that this libertarian idea, which is leave me alone, is anything but the worst social pathology. And in America, this has gone very far. I believe America's a very sick society, I have to tell you. I'm sorry to put it in strong terms, because we're as rich as could conceivably be, and yet we leave people to suffer like nothing else.
So are you in sync? Yeah, totally.
I'm Tony Himes.
We are working towards a new model, backbone model of economy, which is replacing Homo economicus towards what we call a caring economy.
So some kind of a relief, if that we approach.
With mental training, you can change your intentions. So instead of being, motivated by power or achievement or, like seeking grasping system, or by threat, which is another motivational system, you can be motivated by affiliating and care.
Can you go out and influence today 5 people to just mention some of the things you've learned here and how we can spread the word? Because
this belief is shared by a former CEO of a global company and professor in leadership at the Harvard Business School.
Work with them. So think about, as Jesus said in the Gospel of Matthew, go out and spread the word.
A lot of things about work today drag you down. You got to make the numbers, stock prices down. You're under all this external pressure, customers unhappy, employees unhappy, and you feel this pressure. You need to pull back and you say, well, why are we doing all this? Why am I working 60, 70 hours a week? There's got to be a deeper purpose, and that's where you get to the basic essence of any organization. Why? What is the purpose of the organization? Why are we doing this? And I think meditation brings us back to that. It's not a Buddhist teaching. It's not just a certain form of meditation. It's how you realize the connection between who I am in the world, my work, and what I can do to contribute to the world. I'm not going to change the whole world. I'm not going to change every leader. But if we can just have an impact on key people, then it spreads out, like throwing a rock in a pond and the ripples come out. That's what we're trying to do. And leaders can do that because they impact so many people around them.
So if it's distracted, just bring it back. And then sometimes we say, I can't meditate. I've been distracted again.
And I started getting into it by social pressure. It's more than a fashion. In Silicon Valley, if you don't meditate, honestly, you're kind of weird. In Paris, if you meditate, you're totally weird.
The path to an accomplished life is rarely drawn with straight lines. For Sam Polk, it will be written far from the towers of Manhattan. Shocked by the malnutrition of the poor in Los Angeles, the former trader now runs workshops for the local population.
One of the most entertaining moments for me about a grocery ships meeting, imagine, so I have $1 million in the bank and these families exist on $10,000 per year. And so one day in one of our meetings, this wonderful woman named Wendy was talking, and she was saying that her whole life she does things for other people, and sometimes she feels like people don't recognize that. And one day on Halloween, a neighbor came over and said, Wendy, you do so many things for other people, so we decided to do something for you. So we've made your kids costumes for the celebration. And then she said, and she got tears in her eyes, and she said, and then I realized how blessed I am. And, that day, I had been thinking about how much I didn't have, how I didn't have enough, how I was upset with how my life was going. And here was this woman who had so much less than I did, being grateful for what she had. And so I had the honor of learning humility from a woman who had so much less than I did.
All right. So the only thing to look for is sometimes the reason, I'll tell you what, it's thought about, is that